Well, it wouldn't be much of an Enduro fork test without the wildly popular Fox 38. Launched back in 2020, the 38 helped write the blueprints for burly, long-travel, single-crown forks. The latest update to hit the 38 came earlier this year in the form of Fox's new Grip X2 damper and revised lower bushings. With increased levels of tunability in the same tried-and-true chassis, our anticipation was high to see if the 38 would continue to be a leader in the Enduro fork segment. Many of the chassis features that we've come to understand from the 38 were quite novel when the fork first hit the market. Upper chassis highlights include a larger CSU with an elliptical steer tube to improve lateral and torsional stiffness, and a rounded arch that curves forward to clear larger head tubes and has methodical cutouts to minimize weight. The lower legs utilize bypass channels that increase the air volume of the lowers, creating less ramp up and a more linear feel. The channels also provide a pathway for oil to circulate the fork, lubricating the bushings and seals. On the outside of the lowers are bleeder valves that remove trapped air inside the fork and equalize it with outside atmospheric pressure. Other lower leg details include a 44mm offset, a 15mm floating axle, a 180mm brake mount that can fit up to a 230mm rotor, and mounts for a bolt-on mudguard that's sold separately. The 38 uses Fox Evol air spring that places the spring piston inside a floating air sleeve instead of sitting against the inside of the fork stanchions. The air sleeve can move slightly inside the stanchion, allowing the piston to function smoothly regardless of torsional load. The positive-negative chamber are connected via a transfer port that equalizes the pressure between them to improve initial stroke sensitivity. Riders can also install volume reducers in the positive chamber to create a more progressive spring curve. The Grip X2 damper replaces Fox's popular Grip 2 damper and maintains the same four-way external adjustments but offers a higher degree of compression tunability. It also has a faster response time, resulting in more control and traction when you're really getting after it on rowdy trails. The most significant change from Grip 2 to Grip X2 is that high-speed compression is no longer controlled by Fox's variable valve control system. VVC was a great way to create significant damping change with a small amount of movement within the damper. However, it also caused a loss of consistency across the range of adjustability. Ditching VVC in the high-speed compression circuit freed up room in the X2 damper to add a larger compression shim stack and base valve. Grip 2 had a 20mm base valve with 7 shims, while Grip X2 has a 24mm base valve with 23 shims. The additional shims allow the damper to better control oil velocity, creating a more consistent ramp and shim flex at various speeds. This results in consistent damping throughout travel, a more sensitive initial stroke, and good support without feeling harsh. The range of tunability is also more usable, and the change between clicks is more noticeable than before. Now, open still offers some damping, while closed is not completely shut off, making either desirable in the right terrain. Grip X2 marks a significant change in the tuning ideology of Fox's dampers, which have generally been more air spring dependent than damper dependent. Riders should now expect to ride with fewer volume spacers, a proper amount of pressure to achieve normal sag, and more compression damping to achieve a calm, controlled, supportive ride. Beyond all the new damper goodness, the only other update for 2025 forks is lower friction bushings, which, thanks to their grooveless design, retain a more even coat of oil. For 27 5-inch wheels, the 38 comes with 170mm of travel, while 29-inch forks come in 160, 170, and 180mm. We tested the shiny black colorway with 170mm of travel that retails for $1,250 and weighed in at 2,446 grams. This made the Fox 38 the third lightest and third most expensive fork in the test. The 38 was the one fork in the test we had all ridden extensively over the years. However, we had minimal time aboard the new X2 damper, which turned out to significantly impact the performance of a fork we thought we all had figured out. Alrighty, Fox's 38, the old faithful in the Enduro fork category. It's a fork I've ridden a ton over the years, and I've always been a fan of it. I like how definitive and precise the chassis feels.
I feel like they really built this fork for the rude trails. It really holds up in deep compressions. It's super stiff, but yet it's supple in its own way.
The standout trait of this fork was just stability overall. I think the small bump compliance is really, really good, and the range of tuning options is better than a lot of forks on the market in terms of external adjustments.
It was really cool for me the first day to ride this back-to-back with RockShox Zeb, and kind of learned that the feel of this chassis is a little bit stiffer, maybe lacks a little bit of comfort compared to the Zeb, but still really good, still great for an enduro application.
Going off of Fox's recommended setup, it was super comfortable, but maybe a little vague, and having the ability to kind of change the overall behavior of the fork so rapidly is really convenient. I think in terms of tunability, it's a fork that really anyone can find a happy spot on.
So you have volume spacers, you have high speed, low speed compression, high speed and low speed rebound. It might take you a little bit longer to dial this fork in, but I think once you do, you're going to be rewarded nicely.
I'm a huge fan of this damper. It gives you so much more compression support and hold up, and you actually can use the compression adjustments without ending up with a harsh ride feel. This fork is great because you have so many different levels of adjustability. And for that reason, I scored this a 10 for tunability. When I think about my time this week riding a 38, I think the words that come to mind are calm, planted, and composed. It's just a fork that, especially when you get like the really rough stuff, you're not having to think or question what it's doing and how it's performing. It can be so calm and planted, and at the same time, it's not lethargic. If you want to be responsive, there's a lot to push against. You can, without having to maybe pick like some of the other forks, what ride quality you're going for, I think you can achieve like a really nice, well-rounded, high-performing setup, whether that's support, comfort, traction, responsiveness. You can get all of those feelings. And I think kind of like the one other thing that does stand out about the 38, and this is shared, I thought, with the Öhlins and the Zeb, is that the speed at which the fork can transition between compression damping and then recovering and getting into that rebound damping is really fast. Like it just keeps the fork working really quickly and makes for that calm ride where some of the other forks would almost feel like they were packing or just getting overwhelmed, and you start to, instead of being able to look ahead and focus on what's coming up, you're starting to feel a lot of what's happening. 38 and the X2 and the airspring they have in there keeps up really well with the trail, especially when it gets rough. This fork, the Zeb, and the Öhlins RXF 38 are all like on a very equal playing field to me. Like I'm having to really split hairs between which one does what better, but I think depending on what you're after, you can make each of those three forks cater to your needs. For the 38, tunability was a standout thing that it did super well. I would say that comfort was the one that it was maybe lacking a little bit, and I just chalked that up to the stiffness of the chassis.